Last week we spoke about a prison that was shaped like a wheel, like a hub, with spokes, a center portion. This week, as we head to West Virginia, to Moundsville, West Virginia, we stop by a place called the West Virginia State Penitentiary. This, nothing like a wagon wheel with spokes. Instead, an impending doom. As you look at the Gothic style prison built in the late 1800s, as you get closer, it just appears to get taller and larger and more impending. West Virginia State Penitentiary, or Moundsville Prison, operated from 1866 to 1995. Construction was completed in 1876 for a total cost of $363,061. All using prison labor, the first building completed was the North Wagon Gate, followed by the South Hall that had 224 cells, 7 by 5. Then the North Hall, which had a kitchen, dining room, hospital, and chapel. A 4-story tower considered the administration building connected them both. This had space for female inmates and personal living quarters for the warden and his family. On top of the construction of the prison, inmates were also responsible for other jobs, like carpentry, the paint shop, the blacksmith, a tailor, even a bakery. And with a coal mine nearby, the prison's goal was to be self-sufficient, if not, find a way to make a profit. To further help with reform and education, a school and a library were completed in 1900. Eventually, Moundsville would find itself ranked on the United States Department of Justice top 10 most violent prisons. In 1929, the state decided to double the size of the prison in efforts to deal with overcrowding. Those 5 by 7 cells, originally meant to house one, now contained bunk beds, but also a third mattress so they can place a third inmate on the floor. 36 homicides took place, including infamous R.D. Wall in 1929 for snitching, but we'll come back to that. By the 1960s, the population would boom to over 2,000 inmates, calling Moundsville home. 15 escaped during a 1979 prison break, where one inmate caught an off-duty state trooper driving by the prison, using a stolen weapon from inside, mortally wounded the trooper while taking his car, the trooper still firing at him from the ground. By the end of 1985, it was considered that the inmates were running the asylum, so to speak. With picked locks, inmates would roam freely. Due to staff shortages and the holidays, on January 1st, 1986, a group of inmates known as the Avengers made their move and started a riot. Despite none of the hostages having any serious wounds, over the 2 days, 3 inmates lost their lives. 94 men were executed. Hanging was the preferred method until 1949 and was public viewing until June 19, 1931. That was the date that the inmate scheduled for execution stood on the trap door, but when it opened, instead of just hanging around, he lost his head. From then on, these types of things became invite only. And in 1951, The prison switched up to Old Sparky, built by an inmate. 9 men sat in the chair, with the last being in 1959. Even Charles Manson was intrigued by the prison and petitioned to move there and be placed there permanently. To him, it was to be closer to family. But in 1986, the West Virginia Supreme Court ruled that the 5x7 cells were cruel and inhumane, and by 1995, everyone had been transferred out and the prison closed. West Virginia State Pen received a little notoriety when it replaced Ohio State Reformatory, or Mansfield, as the backdrop of Shawshank Prison in the hit Hulu and now on Netflix show Castle Rock. It was also recreated to be Eastern Regional Penitentiary in Fallout 76. Not unlike many locations, there are reports of hauntings, of shadows, footsteps, disembodied voices, and feelings of dread and someone watching you. 2 of these locations, the Sugar Shack and the North Hall, are the most active, according to reports. The Sugar Shack, somewhat under the prison, it was a rec room that often had gambling, drug deals, and some of the most violent, unspeakable crimes would take place here. This is where R.D. Wall would often observe and spy on other inmates to go report back of the crimes that were taking place. Despite what took place there, they say that the North Hall was the worst of the worst. This housed offenders not for what they did on the outside, but for the violent, horrible crimes that they committed well inside the prison. 2 homicides took place despite most of the time they spent 23 hours a day within their cell. But the most notably of those was Red Snyder, very unliked, and was attacked just outside of his cell, poked 37 times. I stopped and visited West Virginia State Pen, or Moundsville, when I was visiting nearby Bel Air, Ohio for an event. I had noticed that it wasn't very far from each other, so I had some time to kill and figured, why not go and jump into a day tour, see what kind of access I can get, and I can look around, check this place out. When you walk into a gift store area, little gift shop, not far from where you could visit the inmates while they were incarcerated in the prison. You had basically the gift store on one side, and if you walked around, there was the waiting area and the room that had the chairs with the division, the partitions with the glass to where you would have your visitation with a prisoner or an inmate. Also sitting right there was the giant electric chair on display for everybody to see. I've noticed a lot of prisons tend to do that, whether the chairs were actually used there or not. So without ever knowing anything really about the way they do their tours or what I'm going to see, experience, or feel within this section, within this building, this property even, I kind of dove in and said, well, let's go for the ride here. We were taken around. They waited until there was a fairly large group of us ready. And at that point, we were taken around by a gentleman who was a former guard of the prison while it was in operation. And he would explain to us different things, the daily life that went on there. As we wandered around, he would also ask us if we want to know anything about the hot spots, about the haunted side of things. And of course, there were a handful of us who did. So what he would do is he very nicely would bring us to an area, explain about the area, the historical significance of it. And then, for those who wished to hear the other side of things, you could kind of hang around and he'd deviate into that area and tell you the stories of the claims of the spirits within any given spot. Now, some of these are more known
like down with the Sugar Shack. Some are not. But either way, it was a situation to where he would tell us, there have been guards, visitors, inmates who used to complain about this area or that area. Some of them, most of them, unfortunately, during the day tour like that, you're not able to go into the main big building, administration too much. You can't go check out the offices where some of the main claims of paranormal have taken place. But you were able to walk around, you were able to see other parts of the building, you were able to see some of the cell blocks, including some of the more notorious cells. I was fortunate enough that during our conversation earlier, I had mentioned to him, the reason I was there. I wasn't able to get into a ghost hunt there. I was only passing through, basically. Not going to be in town for even more than a night, and not even in Moundsville, West Virginia, for that matter. So I kind of wanted to make the most of the little bit of tour time I had and the little bit of time on the property I had. He told me that it's no problem if I wanted to kind of lag behind a little bit to take pictures and things like that. As long as I stayed with the tail end of the group, there'd be no issue, And he was gracious enough to give me that leeway, and I very much appreciated that. I was able to go down. We weren't able to go down into that room underneath the prison, the Sugar Shack. We did, however, get the opportunity to go over near it. There were a couple stairs that lead you down into the almost basement room under the prison there. And he said, as long as you don't go down into there, you can go down to the bottom of the stairs, take your pictures. But then we really need to come on and move along, no matter what you may see. So I took my pictures. I did feel, you could feel almost like there was something drawing you down there. I wanted to go investigate more. It felt like something was like almost calling you in. Come check this out. Come here. It was so inviting as far as the mystery of it all. But again, he was gracious enough to give me the opportunity to even go down there and snap a couple pictures. I wasn't going to overstay that, and I made my way back out. One area he took us over to was this barn-looking structure that had a trap door in the ceiling. Now, the purpose of it, they said, was to load hay into the trucks to where if they had the hay stored up there, the truck could pull in, they could drop it through the trap door. However, prior to that, it was said to have been used for other purposes, and a public display, if you will, of what happens if you don't follow the law in Moundsville. He actually told us that the yard, the lawn area across from the prison, it would become this big public spectacle that would happen where they would all pile out. The families would come and bring picnic baskets and lay down blankets and make a day of it to witness the public hangings that were going on at West Virginia State Pen. As I continued through the building and the property, there's areas that kind of strike you as a little more interesting than others. And one such area that I found was a cell block where, unknowing to me ahead of time, he was daring people, how long can you stay in the cell by yourself? And the people who would volunteer and go into the cell would hang out there a couple minutes, get creeped out, and then want to leave or want to get out of that area and join the group again right away. Of course, there's a whole lot of build-up to things like that. That mental, I bet you can't stay in this cell for more than a minute. And that alone makes your mind begin to wander and race. Why? What happened here? What's gone on here? I, again, personally waited until people had done their time, checked out the cells, checked out the areas, and then I popped in to take my pictures to see what I would experience while I was in there. And I can tell you that there are areas you could walk into one cell and it seemed like nothing. You can tell it's a prison cell. You can tell where you're at. You know you're in a prison. But other than that, there was no emotional attachment or feeling in that area. But you could literally go to the next cell over and have pains in your stomach, like you're bent over in pain because something's there, something you could just feel a heaviness around you all of a sudden. And it makes you very uncomfortable very quick, which is why I see and understand the challenge. But, the hype up to the challenge wasn't nearly as bad as going in and not expecting or not knowing what went on in that area to then find out, oh, well, people were beaten to a point of no return in this cell. Or in this block of cells over here, in this little cafeteria area. There were riots that would break out from time to time, and things were handled as they needed to be handled in a prison like Moundsville. I would definitely go back. I would love to investigate more. I would love to see more of the building and check out some of those other claims up throughout the main tower of the building, the main administration, areas like that. I would love to go check out the one area even more so that he took us into that had a cafeteria to it off in one of the outbuildings. Walking around there felt really uncomfortable and like somebody was always stepping 10 feet behind you, but around a corner. Not just following you, but watching you, watching what moves you make, where you're going, why are you going there. It makes for a very interesting and unsettling experience to be told that, okay, I won't tell you until after, but you can have 5 minutes in this building and it's known as one of the more active spots. All of a sudden, you're walking through going, okay, what could be here? You have the people who are there for the thrill of it all, instantly going, oh, this is haunted, every little knock, every little bang. You have the more skeptical side that walk through going, okay, why? What's happening? What are the claims? And then instantly you turn a corner and it feels like you just walked into something that you shouldn't be. It may not be completely paranormal. I don't know. But it's definitely very unexplained. Prisons tend to have a very dark and deep history and reputation. But something else that has the similar reputation is somewhere we will be headed next week. Now, this location does not have the same type of reputation that Moundsville specifically has. But we're going to head back into New York to a quaint little town known as East Bethany. And we're going to stop by a place that was once known as the Genesee County Village, or the Genesee County Poor Farm, most notably known as Rolling Hills Asylum. And there we will cover not only some of the history and residents that had stayed in the poor farm, but we will also talk about some of the experiences and time spent as a guest, if you will, within that building. Next week on Extraordinary Tales of the Unexplained.